Hello and welcome to the Plos Bros podcast. This is episode 10. Thank you so much for sticking around for 10 episodes. And if you haven't been here for 10 weeks, well, we thank you so much for being here. It's so cool that we've made it 10 weeks and survived each other this long. We're glad that you're with us. I'm Sam Govin. I'm one of your hosts. And this is my co-host, Matt. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing great, Sam. How are you?
Oh, great, buddy. It's another great week. It's been a little bit since the Mando finale. We're finally catching up to talk about it. After we talked about a lot of hype, did a lot of podcasting in one day.
It was a long hour and a half episode for me to edit. Hope that the folks out there liked it and it gave them some new perspective on the upcoming slew of content that we have to be excited for. And 10 weeks, yeah, I'm a little frazzled by that. It does not feel like 10 weeks, especially after we've been consuming all the Mandalorian episodes. It felt like it's flown by, and I can't believe that we're talking about the finale today. It's insane.
Yeah, it felt like we were just doing our hype show. So it's good that we have some more stuff to look forward to, but also a lot of fun stuff to talk about that I never thought we would talk about. So
yeah, and that's the fun of it. We get to talk about things that we never would normally talk about, and we're able to talk just like we normally would anyways. So it kind of gives us an excuse to get through the season together, and it's a lot of fun, very enjoyable. And the highlight of my week is recording these. So thank you.
Well, and it is Christmas week. Merry Christmas or happy holidays to all of our people across the world. We appreciate you all turning in.
Merry Christmas to everybody, and we hope the new year brings a fresh perspective on the world, because hindsight is 2020, Sam. For the first time we can say that after the new year.
Is that gonna be the slogan that they sing at like that they put on all the stuff for this year? For
I hope so. We need it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's been
we have a lot to discuss with this episode.
Sure do.
And the future of the series. I don't know where you want to start, but we can take it piece by piece.
Well, yeah, and I'm glad we're recording when we did, because we have some more insight now into what's going to happen in the future. So, you want to just talk about what's your overall impression now that you've gotten to sit with this episode for about a week now? What are you thinking?
Now that it's been digesting in my system, I'm happy with it, but there are some parts of it that overall I'm not as satisfied with, and I can't believe that I'm saying that. When I first watched the episode, it was my 3 a.m. watch. I wanted to make sure that I did not get anything spoiled and wait until the next morning. And I wanted to watch it on my own at first, because as much as I love watching it with my mom, I get excited by myself and I start yelling at the TV. I just enjoy it a lot more that way. I don't know if you're the same with that.
Yeah.
I sat there and I was really shaking with excitement the first time I watched it. I could not sit back on my couch. I was literally sitting on the ottoman, watching it 2 inches from the TV, cheering, screaming, crying. It was a very emotional episode as well, I thought, especially that ending. It really held the Star Wars morals, I suppose, the ideas of family, parenthood, and love. I love that. And to get the iconic characters back that we did in a way that I was just so grateful to see for the first time in, I don't know, probably how many years? Surely not since the sequels.
Yeah. Well, Luke Skywalker looking like that has to have been 30 years since he was in Return of the Jedi. So
yeah, and
crazy.
I know you view a little differently the sequel trilogy, but I'm in the camp that he did not get the fairest of treatment in the Rian Johnson film. So I was happy to see what they could do with the character this time around. So that kind of rounds out my overall view, but there are some things that we can get into that I wasn't as happy about with it.
This episode was very strong in the sense of they were able to take a wide variety of cast and I think bring them together in a way that was very interesting and not exactly the same as last season, because I was worried that it was going to be, all right, we need to get Frog Lady and Mithril and all these people back together.
Helly the mechanic
and Ahsoka. Yeah, exactly. All these people, we need to bring them back together. And they were able to just bring back Bo-Katan. They had Cara Dune, and it was nice to have that like well-rounded basic group. No one really felt like fluff in the group. My girlfriend and I were watching it. One thing I really enjoyed, it didn't feel like Avengers Endgame. That scene where every possible female character comes together. I really appreciate a good, strong, well-written female character. In that scene in Endgame, it just, in the theater the first time, I was like, oh man, I don't know how I feel about this. But then this episode of Mando was like, yeah, all these women are kicking ass. It was so cool. I mean, like, and
Well,
you
they didn't have to
didn't
tell
see them.
you. They didn't have to
Exactly.
tell you
Yeah.
up front, hey, look at all these women. They are
Yeah.
doing a great job. But instead, they allowed the viewers to recognize that on their own without shoving it in your face.
Yeah, and I think that's really cool. It'd be interesting to see in generations to come what little girls think about moments like that, where they're like, "Wow, all these women of different races and different backgrounds, and they're coming together, both the actresses and in universe. They're coming together to help rescue Grogu." And I
Yeah.
think that's so cool to think about that as a role model for what Star Wars is in the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah, and I don't think that we need to view characters as just being, strong female characters. I think all these characters are what they are. They're characters, both male and female, no matter what the sex or race
Mhm.
is. And that's how I view it. And I think the creators of The Mandalorian seem to feel that way because they didn't shove it in your face the same way that they did in Endgame. And I feel like it's reaching to your audience at that point. It almost feels like you have something to prove at that level because your writing just isn't good enough if you have to announce it in the theater. That's how I feel about it, at least. And I think, yes, you're completely right. It gives other people a chance to look up to these characters who might not have felt that they necessarily identify with a specific Star Wars male or female, no matter who the character is, whether they wear armor or whoever they are.
Yeah, I feel like I connected with different characters in this episode. Like, I really love Fennec Shan. The more I see of her, the more I really enjoy that character. It's one character that I'm really excited to see more of, and I'm glad we're seeing her in the Bad Batch and in Book of
Yeah.
Boba Fett. I'm just excited to see more of those characters. They give you little moments to like each one throughout the episode,
Yeah.
except for Bo-Katan and her ego.
Well,
But
I
we'll talk
wanted
about
to
that.
point something out that I was a little miffed at you for. Not necessarily miffed. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you know where I'm going
No,
with this?
no.
That Sasha Banks said that she will not be in any more
Oh,
episodes
yeah,
this
yeah,
season of The
yeah.
Mandalorian. And I'm like, okay, Sam, yeah. And then we go to that bar, once again, another bar in The Mandalorian that we have to visit. And Sasha Banks is sitting there with Bo-Katan.
I was in the same, yeah. I was waiting for it to be Axe Woves, the other. Like, where is that guy? Is he just taking
I
care of the
think
Gauntlet fighter?
Axe got the axe. Well, they needed that scene with all the females in it, so
Yeah. Well, he could have just hung out with Boba Fett and darted Dr. Pershing.
I
Maybe
guess
that's
that's
where he
right.
is.
It's just off
Yeah.
screen. That would make sense, but I did miss Axe, the famously named character from George Lucas while on the set of The Mandalorian that
Yeah.
no one
Yeah.
knows. I didn't hear anybody talking about that except for us on our podcast. So I felt like we got that story and ran with it. So I'm proud of us for
Just like the Malakili story, I appreciate if anyone writes into any other podcast or do that. I'm so proud of that, and no one else will recognize that that's Malakili. So,
we're the only ones in the podcast world, it seems, that have stated such things that
well, I
we
think it's
believe.
because I'm referring to. I write into other podcasts. I'm like, how do you feel about Malakili coming back? And then they ignore it to say like, I'm like, I should say the Rancor Keeper because that's what most people think of him as.
That's very true.
But yeah, that bar scene was pretty neat though. I thought
It took me aback.
Yeah. What did you think of that planet though when they were flying through it? Like, where do you think they were going? Because it's like that, like nuclear power plant looking, like almost like Lothal. But
Yeah. At first, I was confused because on the outside, it almost appeared as Tatooine. I don't know if you felt the same way, but I was kind of expecting to go back there, and I was wondering like why. But then I realized right away this is not Tatooine. This is something very different.
yeah,
And then I almost thought like, are we on Mandalore? Like, where are we going now? And then in typical Mandalorian fashion, they didn't tell you what the name of the planet was, so we're just sitting here off the cuff talking about it. But it was cool. It was new, and it was just another bar out in the middle of nowhere. It felt like, which is
well, on
very
that
typical.
note though, did you know, I didn't realize it had been officially confirmed, the planet with the ice spiders is the same planet from the opening of the series where he gets the mithril.
Why did no one tell us that?
I just found that out this week.
Why?
Yeah,
Where did you hear that?
I heard it on Star Wars Explained, but then I saw it had been confirmed online.
Randomly? Was this Pablo again?
Probably, but we'll probably read about it in the visual dictionary. Then this, like in February, I think is when the visual dictionary comes out. So,
Gotcha.
yeah,
That's so weird. Why are they just now telling us that? Like we would have had something else to be talking about on that
Yeah,
episode. It felt like a
yeah,
filler episode. The one filler episode of the season for me was that episode.
yeah, yeah. And that it does feel like that. And maybe they'll come back to it like we thought some episodes were filler last year, but I don't really see where else they can go with that unless Frog Lady's kid is a Jedi. I
They grew up so fast.
Her tadpoles.
I was happy that it was just Bo-Katan and the Sasha Banks character in Mandalorian. Like we said, I would have liked to have seen Axe Woes because he was in that other episode and he was already established as being a part of that group. Maybe he
Mhm.
died in another mission since we saw him last. Who knows? And we don't really know
Yeah,
how much time has passed since the beginning of this season as well. So that's also something to think about in a way.
so you have to imagine that Bo-Katan and I believe the character's name is Casca Reeves, is Sasha Banks' character.
Okay.
They're out doing their thing, and I'm glad they didn't spend the time on telling us how they met up, like how Boba and Din found them. But at the same time, I'm thinking, how'd they know where to
Yeah,
find Bo-Katan? Like, you
that's a
know,
very fair point and a plot hole that I don't think a lot of people are picking up on right now because they're so focused on other things,
yeah.
which
Well,
is
because she was like,
natural.
she told him where to find Ahsoka. Didn't say like, oh yeah, by the way, if you ever need to find me, I'll be at this bar.
Well, also to that point, how do they find Dr. Pershing the way they did?
Star Wars science. Well, they could. I mean, in all reality, though, they could have found him in the Imperial record. Like, the same way they found Moff Gideon's Star Destroyer or cruiser. They could have found Doctor Pershing's
True.
transport in that same way. And that's at least the only way that I could think of that they found him. But what did you think of that whole opening scene with the Lambda shuttle and Doctor Pershing getting his ear blown off?
I was surprised to see him come back, and I didn't know at first like why, and I kind of still don't know why.
To
It
be a kind of good guy.
it felt a little random and unnecessary to the plot, but he was the key piece of information that ends up telling them about the Dark Troopers. So I guess they kind of needed to establish their knowledge of that.
Mhm.
But then they already saw them before. I guess they needed to figure out what their exact plan was going to be and how they infiltrate the ship. That could be a
Yeah,
part of it.
yeah.
But I thought it was interesting to see different perspectives, even within the Imperial remnant that still exists now. People from the Death Star, even though they don't necessarily agree the same, the two pilots, they have very different views. One almost felt like he knew a little bit more information. The guy that was holding Pershing
Doctor
hostage,
Pershing. Yeah.
it felt like he had a lot more knowledge than the other one, who was just seemingly a pilot. It
Mhm.
felt like it was his first day on the job or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely felt that way, but I thought it was a really good angle they brought on Kara's character from that scene, where like you really got to dig the knife a little bit deeper because all season they've been building up this whole sense of, oh yeah, she's from Alderaan, she lost everything, and like that conversation with her and Carson Teva. I just love that they're just building on this and just to see where they're growing this character out to see what
Yeah.
she can become
Well,
because she has a lot of
also,
potential.
oh, I agree. I agree. And I don't think we still have seen where she will end up in the long run either. But
Mm.
it was cool to have a gray area between Cara Dune, who's experienced loss in her life, her planet being destroyed, and everyone that she knew and loved being lost on that world. And then also, on the other hand, the Imperial, who lost everybody that he knew from the Death Star. And if you think about it deeply enough, that was kind of his family, probably all he knew if he was kind of separated from his own family that he knew before he could remember and put into the Empire. I feel like both of them kind of share that same similarity of loss, but it
Mhm.
certainly grays the lines between it because you never really feel sorry for the Imperials for losing everyone on those battle stations.
And they do. Did you read the book Lost Stars
I
by Claudia
started
Gray?
it. It was one of those books that I made it halfway through, and then I got busy doing something else with school, and it was just like, I'm gonna put this on the back burner, and I never got back to it. But I know it's one of the better ones for sure.
I don't know how far you got into it, but the one character is in the Rebellion and one character is in the Empire. She has friends on the Death Star. A character who you get to know through the whole book, a really kind character who's like a computer tech or something like that. And then she gets killed during the Death Star explosion. And it's one of those things where you feel it through the entire Star Story of people when they find out the Death Star exploded. People are just quiet and just like crying, and it's like you feel it in a completely different way. Like, so I think it's really cool to see those stories from a different point of view. You know, those people who saw it as a space station and those people who saw it as a planet killer. You know,
Yeah. No,
it's interesting.
it is, and it's nice to see that be fully fleshed out in other places, not just in a novel, but on the screen. So
Oh yeah, and I think Mando's doing a good job of that.
for many things, Cobb Vanth.
Still, we'll talk about the ranking of episodes at some point on this show, but
we definitely have to. We might need to do, when we have time, the opposite of the hype show, like the conclusion of The Mandalorian season 2, our thoughts on it, what we feel like they accomplished from the season as a whole, what our favorite episodes are.
Of the whole series, because I want to rank all the episodes in the series.
Ooh.
Like,
tell us what you would like to see, all of you wonderful listeners out there.
I was sitting down, like, as we were listening to another podcast on our travels for Christmas.
You subject Katie to other podcasts?
So we look forward to podcasts, including our own, every week. We paused it and we were talking for like 45 minutes about our favorite episodes. We were like ranking them and like what our top 3 favorite episodes of the season were. And she was like talking about how like the Ahsoka episode is so awesome, but it's so different from every episode throughout the rest of the show. And it's like, how do you rank that amongst things like The Marshal, which is I feel like a completely Mandalorian episode versus that's like the complete other end of the spectrum. So
I agree completely. Hey, maybe we need to get Katie on the podcast. Maybe we need to bring her. Table. Yeah, we can get her
Vic and Katie, and it's
her parents. We can bring them. Just everybody, come on to the podcast. My mom.
Yeah, exactly. Her parents still have to finish season 2. They actually are just starting it, so they're going to be watching the episodes of Mandalorian and then watching our show as a connector. So
that's like, cool.
I'll make sure I'm not in the room. I don't want to watch.
Love that.
How about the disagreement between Casca Reeves and Boba? They're in the bar where they smash all those tables and flamethrower it out.
Well, the bar scene starts with a full bar, which it barely has anybody there, but there's like nobody left after their little disagreement. It's cool to see, if you think about it, a Mandalorian and a clone technically fighting. It's interesting for us prequel lovers, but in reality, I still don't understand what they were really fighting over.
Yeah.
It was a cool fight scene, don't get me wrong, but it felt like, let's just fight for the sake of fighting. It was a great fight scene. I thought personally, I would have liked to see Boba do a little bit better. I feel like he should have been a bit more strong-willed in this fight, but I guess she's more nimble than he. He's getting up there in age.
They're going there to ask them for a favor, and you don't exactly knock someone out when you're trying to ask them for a favor like that.
That's
like,
true.
Maybe that's where they're going with it. Like, he didn't pull out all the tricks. He didn't shoot the knee darts out to get them to join them. I don't know.
It's easier for Boba to kill somebody than to dispatch them.
Yeah, I think it's such an ongoing funny trope. Every time someone uses a Mandalorian uses their flamethrower in this show, I just have to laugh. Like, every episode someone uses, it's just like their go-to thing. Every single time they're like, oh, I'm gonna use the flamethrower. Every single episode, they're like, multiple times they just decide to use the flamethrower for no reason. Like, I just like, when they're shooting the flamethrowers at each other, sure, that's how fire works. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't understand that, like, fire would deflect fire, and wouldn't it come back and burn you in that case? I was a little confused, to say the least.
Yeah, well, it's better than them both shooting their like grappling lines around each other and being like both tied up. Like, well,
don't get me wrong, it was a cool fight scene. We are being very technical about it. I understand that, but at the same time, we can critique it. This is the season finale.
With enough praises we're going to give it later on in the episode, I think that them calling Jango his donor was a very interesting like turn of the knife. Like,
and him calling her princess was very different.
Yeah, well, it's like they like got like a silent like agreement after that when she's telling him that he needs to make it look real when he's firing on them on the shuttle when they were going onto the ship. Oh yeah. That's what I thought too. I was like, they must have like another agreement off camera where they just talked about their differences.
I don't need to see what happens between Bo-Katan and Boba off camera. Just like I don't need to see what happens after the credits with Fennec and Boba when she's drinking that spatchka. I don't need to see that.
How'd you feel about Bo-Katan's hubris in this episode.
I thought it was high as it was before, though. I don't think that's different for her character. I think it's an expansion on it. In chapter 11, I would say that her hubris was just as large, but the situation in this episode called for it a bit more because you have to think she's going up against the guy that she lost the Darksaber to. Her mindset is ready to deal with that and to take it head on. So she's confident, clearly.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was like, wow, she's really going into this like super headstrong, and I just can't believe that. I was waiting for it to ruin the mission, honestly, and it kind of does. It leaves it on the cliffhanger in that sense of what's she gonna do, like with Din and having the Darksaber now. It leaves it in a very interesting place.
Yeah, I agree, and we can fully dive into that as we go into our future predictions for the show and what we would like to see. But I was not ready for that either. Okay, we can start getting into the mission itself, but didn't it feel a bit too easy?
Yeah, and that's why I said to Katie, okay, so what's going to happen is this plan is not going to work because in every movie where they explain the plan doesn't work. And it's like, it's a common trope when you're writing a movie. And then when it did work, I was like, well then, I have been proven wrong.
Technically, the ending was a bit unplanned, I would say. Their plan went as planned, but they didn't account for a partial failure in that plan.
They fly now, yeah.
Oh, don't even go there with me. They fly now!
How about that TIE launch shoot, though? That was freaking cool. I loved that. That was such a neat thing that we had not seen of a starship that we had seen before. You know?
Yeah. And I remember watching what was it? I guess now 2 weeks ago, the last episode before the finale, where you see Moff Gideon's cruiser. I didn't say it in the episode because it was one of the things that slipped my mind, but I was going to bring up, is that how they get into the ship? Because you can see the front entryway is how you go and dock. So I was wondering how they were going to get through literally the front of the ship itself. It's not like you can just find another entry point. That's clearly the only one.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. They didn't even have a. Well, no, there are side hangars, I think, because that's where Luke lands in the side hangar. Yeah,
you're right. I'll have to go back. Yeah, you're right.
Because it's like a Venator or a regular Star Destroyer. They have like the ones inside the wings on the side of the bridge.
Gotcha.
You know, like there's the one in the front and then the two in the side. I think that's what that. Yeah,
I think you're right. Maybe those doors were closed or something. For some reason, I don't remember seeing that, but I can go back and watch it again, of course.
And I always assumed that they went in the TIE launch chute because they needed to block the TIE fighter, like more TIE fighters from coming out to, you know.
Do you think Gideon knew ahead of time what was happening? He seemed very knowledgeable of the situation already.
He was prepared. I think it's because Din sent him the message in the last episode.
Yeah.
Like he was on his toes, but at the same time, he watches them land and then it's like, okay. Like,
and we still didn't figure out where Moff Gideon was going or why he was in the space that he was in with that ship. What was the point of just going through hyperspace to get to this point where you could be intercepted? I didn't fully get it.
I'm glad it didn't happen, but if Thrawn's fleet just like launches into like it would have just like or the rest of the Imperial Remnant, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I assume Dr. Pershing was on his way to Moff Gideon because Moff Gideon sends for him in the last episode, right?
Yes, he does. And maybe that's how Mando knew to intercept him.
We were talking about like the strong female infiltration team, but any other thoughts about the landing or the infiltrating the ship itself?
Like I said, the first watch, I was literally on my toes the entire time. But upon rewatching it, I had no anxiety. It was just kind of, I'm not going to say boring, because it wasn't. It was action-packed.
Yeah.
And there were some great shots, like when Fennec shoots that stormtrooper through the bins in the head.
Oh, yeah.
That was really cool.
Yeah.
And when Bo-Katan and Sasha Banks' character, I'm always just going to call her that.
Casca Reeves. Yeah.
Casca Reeves is her name. When they duck down from the bridge where it just opens up into space and they hide, when Fennec and Cara Dune are storming the hallway and the stormtroopers come behind them, I loved the two Mandalorians with jetpacks shooting up and dispatching stormtroopers that way. There were just a lot of cool scenes like that. But I will say, I thought for a moment when Kara's gun jammed, I thought something bad was going to happen with her character.
Yeah, and that's why I have that written in my notes here. Is like, what was the point of the jammed gun? And after the episode was done, it was like, what was the point? And I think, for me, I think it was like another reason to show off her MMA like abilities. I guess as an actress, like being able to like use things. It's not just stand there and go pew 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 pew.
I think it added another layer to the action and
Yeah,
gave viewers a sense of anxiety because we know this is the season 2 finale and something bad could happen to this character who we don't know the full story for after
yeah.
this episode.
When they showed those stormtroopers falling out into open space, I was like, they didn't linger on that trooper falling through space for no reason. I said to Katie, I was like, I feel like someone's going to fall through that space or have like a threat of falling into that space. And then the dark troopers come up out of it. It's like, but oh, when they're going through that hangar, you're talking about where Fennec shoots that stormtrooper in the face.
Yeah.
Did you think it was funny when they're like shouldering into people? It's like they're being stealthy and then they just shoot them at the Mandalorian blaster sound. It's super loud. And I was like, well, you're kind of taking away your sense of stealth right now with these really loud blasters.
Well, I think the point was to have guerrilla warfare tactics and use that to their advantage where they're quiet and then all of a sudden they pop out and blast everybody. And then the stormtroopers are running to the point where they heard the blaster fire last and then they'll pop up somewhere else. I felt like that was the way they were handling it. So it didn't bug me as much, but I can see what you're saying. Yes.
That's a pretty solid explanation. I will continue to think that then as I watch.
We got to make excuses for the episode at some point.
I love the build up though to the Dark Troopers because I felt like I was more intense about the Dark Troopers and then getting to the shutting that door than I was for that whole fight in the hallway with the girls because I felt like the Dark Troopers were like the real threat. Yeah, that music I thought was really cool. Like because it's just isolated just to the Dark Troopers, that techno kind of music as they're charging up and stuff. I thought that was pretty wicked cool.
Metal. It felt almost that heavy metal, but with, you know, a typical Star Wars layer of music in the soundtrack there at that point. I agree. It was honestly one of the highlights of the episode for me. I thought the music throughout the entire episode was very well done, just as the rest of the series is for Mando. Amazing soundtrack, even though it's not Johnny Boy Williams. Ludwig does a great job.
Ludwig Göransson, very good guy.
Ludwig, that's the way to say it. I've been struggling the entire time with saying his name, and now you understand how to say it. Ludwig Göransson. There we go. Perfect.
I'm gonna try to listen to the season 2 soundtrack. The only song I have on my phone from Mandalorian is the main title song, like the chapter 1, like the Mandalorian song.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to go back and hear some more of the music. Now the soundtrack's I think it's out already on iTunes.
I think it was out on a week-to-week basis on Spotify at least, because that's the music that I listen to on my phone. But I don't know how iTunes works now.
Yeah, I'll have to go check. Now that you say that, I do remember when the first episode came out, they did have just like chapter 1 music. Mm-hmm. So they might have broken it up. I know they have different artwork for every episode and every song too. So
I hope they kept that up. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. But how'd you feel about that solo fight between that Dark Trooper that does get out?
So I'll be honest. I will be honest.
Yeah, that's what the show's for.
The Dark Troopers felt a little TV to me. I don't know if you felt that way or not, but the animation for it, the way they CGI'd it, the parts where they were clearly not CGI, there was an actual droid model there, were great. I love those views where the tubes come out, they're spraying all over the place, and they actually like get out and start walking. That was cool. But when they start blocking the door and pulling it apart, they're good shots. Don't get me wrong. But the level of CGI felt a little TV to me. I felt like I was watching sci-fi.
Well, and I think it was tough. It kind of worked themselves into a corner here where Luke is in the place where he doesn't really want to kill anymore, and he doesn't want to kill like living beings anymore. Mm-hmm. And they were like, well, we have to work into the storyline where Luke is kind of like, do you remember in the Battlefront 2 campaign when you meet Luke, when he's in like the whole journey to finding Force artifacts and all that stuff? He talks about how he's in this place where he doesn't want to really kill anymore after his father died. And
I mean, it makes sense. I don't necessarily remember that part because I remember killing a lot of stormtroopers along the way.
Yeah. But and I think he mentions because he feels bad about killing, I think is what the thing is. And like they wrote that into the Battlefront 2 campaign.
Makes sense.
So I think that's why they wrote themselves into a corner. I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing for the character at all, but I think that it is one of those things where they had to make a droid type. They didn't want him to go through and just massacre people. You know what I mean? They want him to be
Yeah.
more of a Jedi in the sense of he's trying to keep lives, but if they're just droids, he can wreck house like Mace Windu on Dantooine and the Gandhi series. That's honestly what it felt like at a certain point. I was like,
No, we'll get into it. I have the
Yeah.
perfect scene that reminds me of that is a complete reversal of. Probably gave it away already, but
the Dark Troopers themselves, I do think at the end of the day, I wondered like, what was the point? And in my mind, that's kind of what I've been telling myself is the point is that they needed to have a way for Luke to show that he was really cool and do cool stuff like with his lightsaber without having to worry about the human factor of him killing people.
well, they also were a big threat. I mean, let's face it, if he wouldn't have shown up, they would have easily gotten through the door and killed everybody. It would have been a failure for Dan and the crew. It felt like they were a threat to me, but at the same time, I just felt that the level of quality that was put into them wasn't high enough for what the series felt like in quality that it's been so far.
Mm-hmm.
And the fight was great. Don't get me wrong. I sat at the edge of my seat the whole time and loved every bit of it. Him smacking Din in the face.
Oh yeah, I was worried that he was gonna like crack the glass in the helmet or something.
Well, then I remembered that it's Beskar, and I'm like, I actually kind of found it humorous after I realized that it wasn't gonna break. But
Yeah.
I was also yelling the whole time for Din to grab the staff and just do what he did at the very end.
Yeah.
Because we knew that was the only way that he was gonna beat it. All these other technological innovations that he has in his armor just don't work.
And I thought it was cool they used the whistling birds in that way. Not like really pointed out, but like he tries to use them and like goes on to something else really fast. And then that plays into the Moff Gideon thing later on. Like they didn't like super like linger on it. Like, oh man, here he is. He's using the wrist and he's engaging the things. And then, okay, now he's shooting them. And now let's pay attention to every single one and how they don't work. You know, I thought it was really cool, like how they just kind of just set that off. And then if you remember, then you remember. But if you didn't, then Moff Gideon tells you, oh yeah, by the way, I know you used all of your wrist rockets.
I really liked that he used everything at his disposal to try to beat it and nothing would work but that spear. Nothing. No matter how many times you shoot that thing, not even his flamethrower could ignite the fuel in it and make it be destroyed.
I was waiting for it to General Grievous there for a minute, but it just made it look like a demon.
That would have been cool. That would have been a great call.
It kind of would have been cool. Yeah.
Did you think at any point they would have to actually fight that many Dark Troopers at once?
Yeah, I did think, and I honestly did think that they were going to end up doing that. Mando had defeated one, so I thought, okay, well, he kind of knows how to, do that stuff. And speaking of Mando with the spear, I thought it was really cool. I've been thinking a lot about like Pedro Pascal as an actor and his work on Game of Thrones and the stuff that he did with spear work and stuff like that in that show and how cool he was. He was like, a very cocky character that used a spear a lot. So his work on that show carrying over into this show, I was really interested to see him use that spear in more of a way than he did. And I think he did use that really well in that fight with Moff Gideon against a whole bunch of Dark Troopers. I thought that might have been pretty wicked cool as well. So,
well, it would have been cool to see him wielding the Darksaber and beating those Dark Troopers with that. I thought that was where they were going to go with it eventually, but
are they Beskar though? I guess they couldn't be because Luke cuts through them with his lightsaber. So scratch that.
Yeah, because I remember you were saying that at some point a couple weeks back that your hope was that they were all Beskar and they would be just as impenetrable as him. But I mean,
which would have been a very interesting.
They're not Durasteel though, because a gun didn't pierce through the metal. So there must have been
maybe
something.
They're an alloy of Beskar and something else. You know what I mean? Like something that's stronger.
That could be the case.
Welcome Visual to our Dictionary Star Wars metal podcast.
We just start.
Well, actually, if they put this metal and this metal together from the 1983 comic book in which they describe this metal and it's stronger than anything, and they combine them together, and it'll.
What if that was every episode and we just always begin with the Dark Trooper metal theme? Like, I thought it was cool. The entire battle sequence in this episode was great. Every time they did a fight, it was great. No complaints. But, I mean, the cherry on top was seeing Moff Gideon and Mando finally duel.
Did you ever believe Moff Gideon when he was telling Mando to take the child? Oh, I
did.
Totally
You?
Did.
Yeah. Did you think he was just going to run away? Like, we still didn't get a duel.
But I was thinking Moff Gideon's going to say, oh, well, I have what I need from the child and you can have the child back and I can keep the Darksaber. Okay, good. It was a win-win for both of them. But I think that's what makes a really good villain is ones that you can believe and you can understand where they're coming from. So
no, I think for a lot of people it did fool them. But for me, knowing that we didn't get the duel yet between those two, like we're not going to end this episode without that from a storytelling perspective. In my opinion, the way I look at it, like how you were saying that Bo-Katan has this hubris about her, Mando also has a hubris about him going into this episode by calling Moff Gideon and telling him we're coming for Grogu. I think that Moff Gideon also has that sense of arrogance about him and making that decision for purely no reason, pretty much, to attack Mando. I guess he did know at the end of the day that the Dark Troopers would be back, likely.
Yeah.
Since he knew that they got sucked out into the airlock. I think all these characters have a sense of arrogance, and that's ultimately why they all kind of fail at the end of the day. And the only one who really wins is Luke, who comes in and kicks butt. Because he's the one without any sort of arrogance, even though in The Last Jedi, they say that he does have it, and that was why he became a grumpy old man. But
yeah, well, coming back to the bridge, him just bringing Gideon back, and Gideon's kind of remarks to Mando, like as Mando's trying to have the back and forth with Bo-Katan, like, here, take this. Well, if she can't take it, okay, well, then you have to fight her. Okay, I surrender. Well, you can't surrender. Like, I love how Gideon was like cutting in there, and he was just so excited and so happy to just like twist that knife farther into Bo-Katan. Oh, it was so great. I love that.
And the line after Mando beats him, where he says, "This should be interesting. You're taking me in alive." That was a good line. What did you think of the fight as a whole, though?
I did think it was cool. It didn't last too long. They cut some walls apart. The Beskar spear turning orange, I thought was cool. It was heating up against the lightsaber. I thought pretty neat aspect just to make it look more realistic.
Was there a fear that he would cut through that for you? Because I know I had that. I thought he was going to like dual wield after it got cut in half, and then he could fight like Ahsoka.
I was just going to say yeah. Or it's like, but it's still stuck together. It's like molten steel.
It's bent.
You just like horseshoe around. Come on, Moff Gideon. You're like a bicycle lock. Come on, Moff Gideon. You're coming with me. I'm going to bicycle lock you to the wall.
Jeez. It felt like Gideon was a bit undisciplined with the Darksaber.
Oh, yeah. I think that's the point. Do you remember like the season 2, episode 1, Holocron Heist, the Clone Wars commentary? Dave Filoni talks about how they purposefully made Kato, when she turns into Jocasta Nu, and her lightsaber technique when she fights against Ahsoka is very untrained and very, I think
kind of swiping of the sword in thin air after something and not really thinking before you make a strike.
Yeah, and that kind of non-trained. I think Moff Gideon probably was a warrior of some kind, but he doesn't have a Jedi background. We'll say that.
Well, he's an ISB agent, and Agent Kallus had that staff as an ISB agent. So maybe he also had something of that nature back in the heyday of the Empire.
Kallus won that because he exterminated the Lasats, and he won.
That's fair.
Won that from.
You're right. I forgot.
So it's all good. It's a lot.
Trying to make connections, Sam.
One of my friends from college, Cameron, was watching our last show. Shout out to you, Cameron. Hey, if you're watching the show. It said to me, he's like, "How do you know so much Star Wars stuff? I was watching your show, and you just throw out all these crazy things." I was like, I probably should have majored in Star Wars in college, but I didn't go to the Pablo Hidalgo School of Star Wars.
At the same time, that's also why I use so many pictures, because we reference so many things in the show.
Yeah,
it's fun, and hopefully people learn something from it too. That's what I hope you guys take away from watching this every week, is maybe learning something about the Star Wars universe and being able to make inferences about it for yourself in the future.
Yeah, and if you ever have any questions on any recommendations on things to watch, things to read, things to, anything like that, feel free to drop in the comments. We've taken a lot of Star Wars content. Be happy to give you any recommendations on good things to check out. If you haven't checked any of the other series, or you want to get into the books or the comics, be happy to help you out.
Totally. Couldn't agree more. Let us know all your questions and more.
So what do you think about the Solo X-Wing? When you saw the Solo X-Wing come in, Matt?
Okay, before we get there, I know we're so excited to talk about it. I am too. But a few people are wondering, I know, speaking of questions, why can't she just take the Darksaber? Because Sabine hands it to her in Rebels, and it's not a problem there. I have my own theory for it, but I want to hear what you think first.
So my belief is that something happened. Not that she couldn't unify all the clans under it, because at the end of Rebels, it just kind of cuts off with her unifying the clans. The clans come together and say, "Okay, you're the leader." But I think that sometime after that, something happened in which she wasn't able to fully hold power, and people said it's because she didn't win it in combat. And so I
Mm,
think she's now under that tradition of, oh, well, I didn't get it under rightful tradition, so I'm stuck to this.
that's a fair point of looking at it that way. And I think the reason that Mandalore broke again was because of the Maulorians that were still running around at that point, like the Armorer. That's just my theory about why there is still a separation between all the different Mandalorians still at this point after she unites them with that in Rebels.
Yeah.
But the reason that
But
I think she has to take it back is because it's just that Gideon took it from her, so she has to get it back from him. It's like this. If we were fighting, right? And you took something from me, I would have to get it back because I lost it. So because she lost it to him, she still has to win it again. If we look at Rebels, who had it rightfully before Sabine? It was Maul.
yeah,
She didn't win it from him. She just picked it up after he had fled on Dathomir.
but Clan Ren doesn't stand behind Sabine until she wins it in combat, and when she defeats Gar Saxon, that's when Clan Ren stands behind her and her claim to the Darksaber.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. But Clan Ren at the same time is aligned with Bo-Katan. So maybe in each clan, you could give it to another clan member and have them lead, even though Bo-Katan is not a part of Clan Ren, but they're still aligned together. But
Yeah,
because
yeah.
Gideon is from the Empire and he's separate from the Mandalorians, he's almost like his own clan in a way, the way that the
And
Mandalorians would
so,
think about it. And so
and
he
Din
would have
isn't
to win it back from
technically
him.
in. Yeah, so Din's not technically in. Yeah, he's a child of the Watch.
Yes, and so
So
maybe that's a part of that code, if you will, as well. But
yeah, I'm all about that.
I don't know. I think we'll get a better explanation of it in the future. I hope we do.
We still have a novel coming out this year in the first quarter of 2020, a Mandalorian novel coming out that has no title, no nothing yet, no synopsis or anything. It's after this High Republic stuff on January 9th. I believe it's somewhere between February and May. We're getting a Mandalorian, the visual dictionary, the art. Oh, I guess the art of Mando is already out. There's a junior novel and I believe a main novel coming out.
Wow.
I've been saying I want that to be about the armor. I'd love to see like a history of the armor, but at the same time, it could be a history of what happened with Bo-Katan and that storyline. I think that's a story we need to see and not just read. So I feel like the
Yeah.
armor storyline, or a character like that, is a really good story to read in a novel. You don't necessarily need to have visually in the show.
I agree. I mean, we could talk about how they're doing a one-off version series for one specific character in this show, and I don't think it's out of question to do that for a different character as well, who is under the title of Mandalorian. But I hope that book is new content and it's not just the Mandalorian retold in book form, and literally how the show is separated into chapters, the book is separated into
No,
the same chapters. Please do not do that. Please.
I think that maybe the junior novel would do that. They've said that this is like a novel. The press release came out over the summer, so I'd have
Okay.
to go back and look at that. I think that's out in the first quarter because I am excited for the visual dictionary. I get all those. So
Yeah. And I would be excited for the art of if it wasn't so darn expensive.
well,
Did you get it? Wow. Rip.
30% off at Target. Must be those New York prices, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, we had to stop for some last minute Christmas presents, and
It's a beautiful
it
thing.
was Christmas present to myself.
Do you like
It's
it?
hard
Did
to
you
beat
open
when
it up?
I read the whole thing in 2 days. It's so good.
Is there some good art? Is it the same art from the show that you see at the end credits?
Yeah. So some of it is the same, like here, like the gunslinger.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But the whole thing's broken up by like the episodes. So every
Gotcha.
episode talks about, like, it has like a main head page where it talks about the pitch, how the director got involved in that episode.
Ooh.
And but it's mostly written by Doug Chang and Dave Filoni, more or less, and like some of the guys who they work with, but mostly it's Doug Chang and Dave Filoni. And it's a lot of Dave Filoni napkin sketches of what I like to call them. And he says, I drew this on an airplane because originally I guess the child was going to be a teenager, and it wasn't a Yoda species, it was just like a teenager. So there's an early concept art of them, like two bounty hunters fighting over, they're like riding these wolf things, of course, and they're like pulling the teenager between them. It was pretty cool. Them talking about how they developed IG-11 and all that stuff. Pretty neat stuff.
That's amazing. I need to get my hands on one of those. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Just to hear like those stories of how they created the show itself and the main ideas of it, it makes me want to buy that book so much. Because
and
that's
like
the behind the scenes stuff that I love so deeply.
and trying to figure out how they made the Razor Crest, like narrowing down. It says like Razor Crest model 5A, but like it skips a bunch of numbers.
Yeah.
So there's like way more than what you're seeing in the book, and they put like 8 different pieces of art in the book.
Yeah.
But you don't like it's pretty neat stuff. I love this, and it makes me want to buy the other ones for the sequel trilogy. But
The Force Awakens is great. That's the one that I have, and then I also have Star Wars storyboards from the original trilogy. They made a prequels. I never got that, which is cool to see the early drafted storyboards. Awesome. And then I also have the Motherlode Ralph McQuarrie 2-book thick thing that's sitting on my shelf with C-3PO and R2-D2 on the cover. That is a great book.
I was going to tell you, if you're looking for, and for all of you viewers out there if you're looking for the visual dictionaries for Rogue One or for The Last Jedi, we were at an Ollie's. If you have Ollie's in your area, for $3, they had the visual dictionary of The Last Jedi and the Rogue One.
I would have taken that for $3.
Yeah, so I encourage you all to go to, if your stores are open in your area, go to Ollie's and check and see. They had a like specific Star Wars section in my store, and they had the cross sections for $2 of The Last Jedi, and I almost bought it. I had already bought a bunch of Vader comics, so
that's fair.
But yeah, just to let you know, and for all the people out there, if you're out and about with some Christmas money.
Back to the Mandalorian after that commercial break.
How did we get on that tangent? We ended up at Ollie's. Good stuff, cheap,
So what did you think about the whole buildup with the X-Wing entering in? Did you know that it would be Luke Skywalker?
So like this whole season, the X-Wings have appeared in 3 or 4 episodes of the season. And so my first thought was, all right, well, this is Carson Teva coming in. But like it was like a solo X-Wing, and I was like, okay, the fleet's gonna jump in. The rebels are gonna be here because Cara Dune is a Republic Marshal, and she called in reinforcements.
That's fair. That's a fair assessment. I thought you were gonna say Carson comes in and just kicks butt and cleans house.
I'd be fine with that. Him and Dave Filoni. Dave Filoni with his pet wolf.
He like calls to it. Here, buddy.
Let me take off this helmet. It's really bad. I have this cowboy hat that I put on. It protects me from droids.
It's this giant Anuba that we saw Embo have as a pet in Clone Wars that comes out.
But yeah, that's what I thought. And then so it showed the dark figure walking through the hallway. Katie's first thing was, "I'm sorry, it's not the snake guy." And I was like,
oh, that is rich. That made my day.
And thank you to all those people out there. I was watching Star Wars Explains weekly Q&A, and someone asked him if we would see the story of Obo Rancisis, and he answered it, and I appreciate the person out there, if they are connected to us or not, who asked about what happened to Obo Rancisis after Order 66, because
they have to be. It has to be someone you watch.
I really hope. But anyway, and then with the cloak on, I thought, well, it could still be Quinlan Voss with the green lightsaber and the cloak. It could still be him.
Oh, come on.
And
the whole time.
No. And then I saw the black glove, the belt buckle, and I said, oh my, it's actually Luke. And I was like, they won't show his face. And then they showed his face. And they did do some really cool choreography. I did some kneeling in front of the TV, taking some pictures after the 3rd time I watched the episode just to get some really cool stills. There are some really cool action poses and stuff that Luke does. Yeah, the buildup was very nice. To
me, I was sitting there in front of my TV. As soon as I saw the X-Wing, I knew. Well, my mind, when I hear Jedi, it always goes to Ahsoka. But then I realized, oh, we already got her. So this is going to be somebody different.
Yeah. And then in my mind, it was, why would Quinlan Voss be flying an X-Wing? What's the point? And Oppo, he would just be doing his own cool thing. He'd still have his Jedi Starfighter, so.
Slithering through the hallway.
Wouldn't it be cool, though? He would have been slithering up around the hall, like around the ceiling and like jumping from the ceiling and attacking droids, like wrapping one droid up and slicing the other one.
I'm perfectly fine with what we got. I was, very emotional in the moment because I don't know. It just feels like Luke Skywalker is finally back for the first time in forever. To me, that was Jake Skywalker in the sequel trilogy, but this felt like Luke. It was epic. It was exactly what I wanted until he took the hood off. I don't know how you feel about that. But what I loved about it so much, before we go past it, the hallway sequence was a reversed hallway sequence from Rogue One.
Oh yeah.
And that's what I dug about it. It was such a callback to that film, even being in the Disney era, but it was a moment that they knew fans loved. And to see, instead of Vader going up against these rebels who can in no way fight against it, having the exact opposite, machines that no person could go up against, the same as Vader, being fought by a Jedi who just cleans house and they're no match for him. Well done.
Yeah, and I didn't pick that up until my second viewing, and I really dig that whole thing. But talking about Rogue One, though, I think comparing the look of Luke versus Tarkin and Leia,
Yes.
I think, I mean, that technology, you can see the growth. I think in my ranking, Tarkin is still number one, and then it's Luke, and then it's Leia. I personally think Tarkin looks great in Rogue One.
I do too.
And I don't know if it's just because we've seen Luke's face so much, but
well, Tarkin, I think, looks so good because Tarkin in the original trilogy, he's so gaunt that he almost doesn't look human in that same sense. Mm-hmm. And the actor that they got to do Tarkin looked already so close to Tarkin, so I think it just helped for them to do the digital rendering. But I sent you a deepfake version that looked so much better than whatever de-aging technology that they used on Mark Hamill for this episode. And to me, it's like, if some guy on the internet can do it better than you, why don't you do it just as good as him? Am I wrong for thinking that? I don't know.
Well, what do you think of the ones you call it deep fakes of what they did in Rise of Skywalker with the training sequence?
I would say, yeah. Because it's not de-aging. They took Billie Lourd, Carrie Fisher's daughter, and they digitally rendered Leia's face onto her when they did that training sequence. So that's not de-aging.
Have you seen the behind the scenes? You and I watched the behind the scenes together of that, where they take the scene from Return of the Jedi and just crop it and then put it on the Yeah, it's tough to see. I can see both sides of it, but I think they were once again fell back into the corner with Luke, because do we keep the actor who has played him, who is known to play him,
who's still living?
Exactly, who's still living and still, so involved in the fandom, or do we replace him? I'm very excited to see when Gallery covers that.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to get the full breakdown of everything of how they did that.
We have to.
The picture that Mark Hamill posted on Instagram of him with like shushing, he looks like he had a wig on, like partially. So like, I'm wondering how much of that they did with him. I was very happy his voice sounded better than it did in Forces of Destiny. How weird his voice sounded in that, where it was, older Luke talking as younger Luke. The voice sounded better, but
I think they used lines that they already had in the past. It sounded like, I forget what his first line is, but I'm pretty sure it was a line that Luke already had in Return of the Jedi that they just reused, much like how they did Ben Kenobi when he said Rey in The Force Awakens. I felt like they almost just used older lines.
Even Leia in Rise of Skywalker, it fits into like this weird place where it kind of works, but
yeah. Part of me thought, honestly, it looked about the same as Star Wars Battlefront. The part of me. I thought they were going to go with Sebastian Stan. Before he took it off, it looks like Sebastian Stan. I'm not going to lie. I don't know if I'm the only one who thought that or not, but it doesn't look like Mark Hamill for sure.
No. Yeah, and I don't know how you've seen like movies like, was it Looper, where they de-age Bruce Willis and stuff like that, like, or even in Iron Man 3 where they de-age Tony Stark. Like, I think that they've done this stuff, and all of Captain Marvel, they de-aged Samuel L. Jackson. Yeah. We've seen that they have that technology, and just for some reason didn't really click as well in this thing. I don't know.
And maybe it's because we're seeing it on TV for the first time, and maybe it honestly looks better in a theater. That's just where
you can't see the details.
Yeah. And that's where I'm just coming from. I'm trying to figure it out because it just doesn't look as good as I think it could have.
Oh, I would love to see this whole season. If I could just rent out a theater and just watch this entire season.
That'd be really cool.
Just if I could
with
rent
all
out
of our fans,
for 16 hours.
With all of our fans.
So 3 of us, because your mom would be there.
I don't think Vic would show up.
Yeah, Katie would be like, "Oh man, I got a thing that day."
I like that they used him because I think, and I hope we see it in gallery, they might choose to not have that interview with Mark Hamill, asking him, so how does it feel to come back for the character again after the sequel trilogy? I want to see that conversation going from where he's been in The Last Jedi, Force Awakens, Rise of Skywalker as a character, and comparing that to this experience. I want to know exactly what he has to say. He deserved better. I'm sorry. This is exactly what he deserved. Maybe not the digital rendering, but being able to be a complete badass and walk through that hallway, taking out all these dark troopers.
So to me, this is exactly what I wanted in young Luke. The sequel trilogies are what I want out of old Luke, if that makes sense. Like, that is the more mature Luke. He went through this period where, like, in Battlefront 2, we see him playing Indiana Jones. In this, we see him kicking butt and taking names. And I think that he went through this whole long period of his life before he trained Ben and started the academy. It was really cool to have that time where he was being like, the prime, and then you pass along. We are what they grow beyond, is what Yoda said.
Yeah.
And I think that I liked seeing that his whole life isn't just that. Like, he was able to settle down and start the academy. It's kind of like, like any person, you have your time where you sow your oats or whatever. And, you have the wild time in your life where you go out and do stuff, and then you decide to settle down and you become more mature and make mistakes and do stuff. That's why I like Luke in the sequel trilogy, not necessarily Rise of Skywalker, but in The Last Jedi, I do like his arc in that.
To me, it felt like a reversal of the character, and almost as though he felt more immature during the sequel trilogy. I don't know if I'm the only one that thinks that or not, but honestly, it felt like he reverted because he learned so much about being a true Jedi in The Return of the Jedi, casting your weapon aside and saying no in the face of Palpatine to fight him. To me, that is the lesson that he learned. It was more of love, and that is how to act as a real Jedi, not necessarily with a lightsaber. I mean, he's fighting droids in this. This is, like you said, in the vein of that thought still. But by the time we get to him in The Last Jedi and understand where his head's at, then I guess it felt like he reverted to me.
And I think that the big turning point is that moment with Ben. He feels so much failure. He talks about that great scene where him and Rey are sitting in that pool area in the sun setting, and they're, he's talking about the whole Jedi and how everything was in their hubris. They let the Emperor rise. That's their stuff. But to him, his failure because he lost Ben, I think he thought like through love and through training, Ben would not go into the dark side. And I think that like he sees that as his failure. And so he's punishing himself by cutting himself off. Like, he's not good enough for the Force in that time. So that's kind of like where I see it. And Rey teaches him that he's able to come out of that. Like, they're all part of this system. So I think that's kind of where I see it. And I can also understand where you're at with it as well, because
and likewise, right back at
he's
you.
he's such a beloved character that I understand why people have so many opinions on it.
Well, part of it is you don't want to see your hero turn into a different character as well.
For me, by the end of Last Jedi, he comes back to being a better character. Not to being a better character, but being like what he was in his prime, if you want to say that. But in Rise of Skywalker, not a fan.
See, that's Luke Skywalker to me, even though his hair is a bit more straggly. I guess when you're a Force ghost, you just don't cut it. But
they don't have barbershops in Force Purgatory, Matt.
He just looks a little too Jesus for me in The Rise of Skywalker. But him catching the lightsaber as a reversal when he threw it over his shoulder, because I'm going to be honest, that was the thing watching The Last Jedi that still makes me the most upset, and it did in the theater when I first saw it, is when he tosses it over his back, because we had been waiting for 2 years, and it just I felt so hollow in that moment.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think if he would have taken it and it like would have pulled back, and then it would have showed his full body, and then he would have just dropped it, for me, that would have had more weight than him throwing it over his shoulder, because and I agree with you on that. I think that him just dropping it would have had more of an emphasis than him just throwing it over his shoulder. But that's for our Last Jedi commentary when we do that someday for our Patreon.
That'll be a show worth paying for, folks. Let me tell you. we're completely skipping over something kind of major. Bo-Katan gets lit up.
Oh yeah, what?
What was that? And then Gideon about to commit suicide, and what was that? And it's just such a weird moment too, because you're sitting there like in awe over Luke Skywalker kicking butt in the hallway, and then all of a sudden all this is happening with Moff Gideon, and you're like, what?
The way I took it was he's like a crafty kind of guy, and he has a pistol hidden in his cloak, and he's gonna pull out every trick he can to try to win out. But
Yeah.
that's the way I kind of saw it. But
it was out of no honor. There was no honor behind him doing that. And I think that it called attention to that part of his character.
Yeah, and him trying to kill Grogu, because if he couldn't have him, then nobody could.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess. But I'm really happy he survived, because I want to see way more Moff Gideon.
Now, this is kind of getting into the future, but do you think we will?
Yeah. I don't think he's going to go Agent Callus and become like a part of the crew and hang out with everyone every week. But I think that...
Please no.
It just becomes an episode of Mayfield somehow got recaught by the New Republic, and Mayfield and Moff Gideon are out there chopping up TIE fighters together. Like, what'd you do? I busted a prisoner out. What'd you do? Well, I stole a baby Yoda, and I was a former Imperial Moff.
Jeez.
Oh, well, they become best friends.
Maybe he'll make friends with Clancy Brown and that other girl, Twi'lek character, and they'll start their own crew, and he becomes a bounty hunter. And
he gets an eye patch. He becomes a pirate lord.
And this is my biggest gripe with the episode. It felt too easy and for nothing. Because at the end of the day, think about it. If Din and the crew wouldn't have ran in there and did everything to save Grogu, we would have gotten the exact same ending. Pretty much. Because Luke would have went and grabbed Grogu. I think, pitch, if they ever wanted to retcon all this and do it again, maybe for another timeline, what if they get there and Grogu's already gone and they have to go find him, and it ends up that Luke already got to him before they did?
There's the empty ship. Nobody alive, just an empty ship floating in space.
Moff Gideon's gone.
There's all zombie troopers, because it's actually the Death Troopers book from Legends.
Maybe not that, but...
that would have been interesting, I think. But for the sake of it, I think that...
we needed the goodbye.
Season 1 wrapped up in such a nice bow. I think they wrote it in a way that if it ends and it's only one season, so be it.
Yes.
People don't like it for some reason, then we can just say, oh, it's a one-off series with a tiny tease at the end. But this was like, I thought, didn't be kind of like we talked about, like The Empire Strikes Back. It's going to end on a cliffhanger, and then we're going to go. And they kind of ended on a Boba cliffhanger, but not really a cliffhanger anywhere else. So,
but it feels almost as if they're writing the show not knowing that it's going to get another season.
Well, when Book of Boba Fett's in production already, and season 3 is in the final stages of pre-production, like, I don't understand why. Yeah, I agree with you. That's what...
I mean, they did it in season 1, and even during our Mandalorian hype show before season 2 started, I remember saying it kind of feels like the characters already wrapped up and had an arc.
And then they got another little arc this year, and then they're going to get another little arc, But
we're not going to be able to see the big arc until the ending.
Yeah.
And it just, to me, it didn't leave me wanting more, strangely.
Well, and to think about how they filmed a lot of stuff before season 1 even came out, which is so weird to think about. They talk about that in the book, where they were doing a lot of stuff as Rogue One was going on. Like they were
really
stuff. Yeah. Oh yeah. And they're talking about like how as Rogue One was premiering, they were doing all this pre-production work for Mandalorian. So think about like 2016, when we're going to see Rogue One, they're doing all the prep stuff for 2019.
That was probably before Rise of Skywalker was in pre-production.
They were probably writing the script for the original one with the Battle of Mortis and all that stuff.
Rip.
Like the guy who played the Weequay bartender, I think we might talk about this in the Marshall episode. He filmed his stuff before season 1 came out.
I didn't know that. We did not talk about that.
Yeah, so season 2, like that, so much stuff was filmed before they even knew how people reacted to season 1. So
I mean, I don't mind that. I don't think they should
change
anything in the plot based on fan feedback. I don't. That's not the way an artist works and tells a story that needs to be told a certain way. That's surprising. That's very surprising. I just don't understand why they ended the villain story, it felt like. I mean, maybe not entirely, but they just wrapped up every point that we had any questions about that this
But
season posed,
I
except
mean,
for the Bo-Katan stuff, really.
but
What
there's
happens
still
with
the
the dark
stuff
saber?
out there. There's still the stuff of like who sent IG-11 and who were the guys protecting the child to begin with. So I think there's still questions from the
And who
beginning of the
took
series we still
Grogu?
don't know about. Yeah, and like what's gonna happen with the rest of the children of the Watch, like that kind of stuff. Like you said, I think there's some major stuff that's been wrapped up. But we got some new questions asked this season and some new stuff answered. So I think that that's
It's the best way to
the
tell
show's gonna
stories.
continue. Yeah, yeah, and make it feel like there's still like a little bit of an ending, but keep people wanting more
Yeah.
in a year. How about R2 with Grogu? I don't know if you saw. Did you see? I made some art today. It was on my Instagram
I
story
didn't see it
for
yet.
my sketches. I did a quick little sketch of Luke with R2 and Grogu, and Grogu's reaching for the lamp. They're like at a campsite, and Grogu's reaching for the lamp, and then there's like a ghost of Yoda sitting next to them, and like Luke and Yoda are looking down at Grogu. He's reaching for the same lamp that Yoda wanted on Dagobah. I think that's a cool idea of Luke and Grogu just kind of hanging out with R2.
Did it feel like a little bit that Grogu remembered R2 at all? Because R2 comes in and he's like, oh, yeah, I can go with Luke now because I know you. Meanwhile, he's like holding on to Mando's boot before R2 shows up. It also took R2 a very, very long time to get there. As Luke's like cutting through all the dark troopers, R2D2, I just picture like rolling through the hallway.
There were too many stairs. He's trying to find an elevator. It was like in Attack of the Clones when Anakin and Padme are walking on Naboo and R2 is like way behind them because he has to do all those stairs.
Yeah.
Like, bloop, bloop. And it's just like there are all these staircases in that Star Destroyer. Luke just doesn't care. He just keeps going, and R2's like bloop, bloop, going up every little stair.
It's good stuff. Or it's like in the sequel trilogy when BB-8 is going somewhere that we don't understand how he could get there being in a ball, and then it cuts to another scene of him just being there. You ever notice that?
If you ever notice in Rise of Skywalker when they're on Kijimi, there are ramps on like the stairs, so they can do that. They noticed that people were complaining about that, and like from other scenes, like when BB-8 shows up in the basement of Maz's castle.
Yes.
And then he randomly shows up out in the jungle with Rey. But then on Kijimi, the first time we saw it, I was like, oh, there's a little ramp. Like him and Dio just go up the little ramp, up the stairs. So
They
like,
must
I
have
think they
planned
just
for
kind of put a
that.
piece of wood there. Yeah. Maybe R2 was the one who saved him from the Jedi Temple, you know? While Anakin was killing people, R2 just rolling around saving Grogu.
Gets him
and Yoda
to
had the
Quinlan
relationship.
Voss. I don't necessarily think we're going to find out who saved Grogu.
No, and I honestly hope that we do not see that in Bad Batch. I do not want to see Grogu.
Oh, no. What if it's the Bad Batch that saves Grogu?
I do want to see some certain Jedi characters that survived Order 66. Because they have the models for older Quinlan Voss, and they have the awesome one for Opa Rancisis that they never got to use in the main series. So why not use them in this? Because it's the same animation style. We know they survived.
But I mean, the story is mainly about the clones, and we talked about that last week in our hype show for new content coming out. But it would be cool to see other Jedi, yes.
But how about Din removing his helmet?
So well done. I thought it was great. But at the same time, it felt a little lackluster because we just got him removing it in the last episode before this one. So it wasn't as powerful.
I do think it would have been nice if they would have done that earlier in the season, if they would have had him remove his helmet sometime earlier in the season for some reason. I don't know what it would have been, but just to have that, like, oh yeah, it's Pedro Pascal's face under there. The well-manicured face. I watched the Cinema Sins video for that episode today, and it was like, why does Mando keep his face so freshly shaven? That mustache is perfectly trimmed, and no one ever sees his face. Like, if I was that guy, I wouldn't.
It's more shaven than us.
Yeah.
Well, to me, I saw that scene as Return of the Jedi. Let me look on you with my own eyes. That's literally what I heard as I watched that scene. And Luke, looking at Mando, I think felt that.
That happened to me last week.
Oh.
He's like, yo, my dad did the same thing last week.
Yeah. I don't think that was last week. I don't think that was last week, but it was a very similar moment. And when Din looks at Luke with the tears in his eyes, it was pretty powerful emotionally, I would say.
For an actor who's had to work this entire series with his face covered, more or less when he was the character, I think that he's done a pretty good job of, he's earned having some face time. For next year, we're going to see more of him without the helmet.
Oh, I think the helmet's off for good until he fights now.
And we've talked about how much we want to see him with the armor and his old friends again. I think he's been hanging out with Boba and Bo-Katan enough to realize, like, maybe he's just, gonna follow their ways now.
Here's my thought. The Razor Crest is gone. I think this ship is the new ship that he's going to use. I mean, Bo-Katan already said that she's going to use it as a way to gather more Mandalorians to her cause and ignite the clans.
They're gonna use the Acclamator class destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just want
So
to check.
almost like in Rebels, how they get that bigger ship, and they
is that Gazanti?
No.
The Gazanti, the what?
The one that they get from Ryloth. I guess that's not
the big
seen
flat
as much.
one. Yeah, the one that Commander Sato sacrifices himself on. Yeah.
But I see it almost as like building their forces, and Mando's going to use this ship to find other Mandalorian coverts and unite them with the Darksaber, because he is the perfect Mandalorian to do it, right? He is not from one specific clan. He comes from nowhere. He's like the self-made from the bootstraps foundling, right? And he came from the enemy of the Mandalorians, the like Maulorian type group, the Watch, the cult, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I think since he's learned so much since then about what it means to really be a Mandalorian, to be honorable, it's the same question that the show has asked us from the beginning. What is a Mandalorian? I think that he is going to find all these different coverts. I think we're going to see the Armorer come back and either reject what he's doing, and maybe he'll have to battle her, or join forces together with this new group.
For some reason, I just thought about Santa Claus 3, the escape clause, when Jack Frost gets the snow globe and gets to go back in time and become Santa. I was thinking of the Armorer getting the Darksaber and her getting to like rule the Mandalorians on her own, like just like her fighting him and somehow getting the Darksaber and like getting to make her own evil side of the Mandalorians. And I was like, no, and then he has to like fight her back to get the.
And they're battling in a Christmas sleigh as that happens.
And then you have to go in the world between worlds with Ahsoka to go back in time and.
Oh, please, no.
I really don't want to see that place ever again.
I think if we saw it in the Ahsoka show, it'd make more sense.
Yeah, and they've teased it in the writing, but...
Do you think that's a valid theory, though? What do you think about that?
Oh, yeah. I did. Sorry, and I didn't mean to interrupt you with stupid...
No, you're good.
I just, in my mind, immediately went there. I was like, I have to just let this all out. Because it's Christmas time. We've been watching a lot of Christmas movies. I do agree with you that I think that it'd be interesting to see him just like land in a gauntlet fighter, and everyone's like, oh, a gauntlet fighter. And then he walks out and just like holds up the Darksaber, like, yeah, that guy, we're following him. And then everyone just gets on the ship, no words said. Just like a whole episode of him just landing on these it's just like the same shot, like it's a different background. It's like the gauntlet fighter landing, him walking out, holding it up, and then people just walking onto the gauntlet fighter.
Every week is 2-minute long episodes, just.
And then it just shows him sitting in front of a bigger crowd on the Star Destroyer every week and just holding it up, and everyone cheering, and then the episode ends. Directed by Dave Filoni.
Do you feel like Bo-Katan will be the new mentor figure for him and have to accept that she is not going to be the leader of Mandalore?
I hope she gets over herself. I would really enjoy that a lot more, I think, if she like just sucked it up and was like, okay, well, I had my chance at this, saying, you won this fair and square against this guy. I lost, but I will be happy to teach you the ways of being a leader. He's not a well-refined leader, but I think he doesn't
want to be the leader, though.
And I think those are the best kind of leaders, are the ones who don't want to be leaders.
Oh, exactly. I agree wholeheartedly. This would be the first time that Bo-Katan would feel as though she's in the shoes as a mentor. And I think she will have to come to terms with how to do that appropriately. And he will have to come to terms with how to be a student of her, because he's pretty bullheaded. He's not necessarily great at listening to other people and learning from his mistakes.
Yeah, you're right. That is true. I'm very interested to see what will happen to him. But I think that overall, I think it was a very good way to wrap it up, because it leaves it in that gray area. Like what's going to happen with him and her and Moff Gideon, like where does he fit in?
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to keep him if he played a role like in The Walking Dead, the main villain of the last few seasons. They, instead of killing him at the end of the big battle at the end, they capture him and put him in prison. And he becomes like a mentor to the leader of the group, and like he just goes down there and talks to him and like talks about being a leader. And so it'll be interesting if Moff Gideon is just alive in prison like Negan, and just like sitting in prison. And then Din goes down there and just like vents to him about being a leader. And he's like, yeah, well, this is what happens. And this is the history of Mandalore. I'm just a big exposition robot. And he's in prison. And then the right time comes along and then he gets out, and he's like, he causes havoc and escapes and whatever. And it's like, we have to go track him down, that kind of thing. So,
yeah. I almost hope that they keep him around on that ship like you're explaining. I like that idea a lot. Instead of taking him to the New Republic prison, that would probably end the character for the show for a certain point until they decide to bring him back and create some trouble for the characters.
In chapter 7, remember Kara says, oh, well, he's dead. So, like, according to the New Republic, Moff Gideon's dead. And they hasn't gotten back to the New Republic that Moff Gideon's still alive. So, according to all the registries and everything like that, he's dead. What's the point in taking him back when they think he's dead? So,
who says that he's dead? I don't know.
When Cara Dune and Grief Karga and Mando are in the bar, and after they shoot up the bar, and then he lands.
I don't remember that.
She says, Moff Gideon's dead. And he's like, and then he says, oh, Cara Cynthia Dune of Alderaan. And Din
that was
Djarin
glazed over for me. But maybe that's why we got the same thing happening with Bill Burr, Mayfeld, his character. Oh, yeah, he's dead, but we're going to keep him around. And then the pilots come and they're like, what are you guys doing around here?
Yeah.
I feel like there's going to be a time jump. I don't know if you have that same feeling.
I also love the memes that I've seen this week of Boba and Luke passing in hyperspace as like Luke's leaving with Grogu and Boba's coming back to the acclimator. Like they like look at each other like, wait, who's that again? Like, I know that guy.
I mean, going along with that question, I guess this is something that we didn't talk about, but are we going to see Grogu come back?
Like Din says, I will see you again. To me, that says you're going to see him.
I agree. I agree with that. But maybe the next time we see him, he'll be a teenager and
it'd be like a year and he's grown to be like a long brown haired Yoda.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the direction is that they're taking with the idea of having this Jedi figure involved in Mando's life and then removing that. We've become so accustomed to having that duo when we watch this series.
I think it might be good for a little bit to have, like, it was nice in chapter 15 to have Din have some space to like have his own episode with no Grogu. I think that was a way for them to set up, we're going to have some episodes and it's not just a cold start for it.
So Boba Fett. I have no idea what made me stick around till after the credits, but for some reason, something in the back of my head said there's more. I had no clue. Like I said, this was watching it at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And this was before the internet saw it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask is how you knew.
I just kept watching because this wasn't a normal ending with all the art being shown. And for some reason, I felt like I needed to stick through the entirety of it. I'm shocked, honestly, that I did. And I'm super grateful that I didn't see it online first.
Yeah, me too. And I am so happy that you told me to, like, I avoided the whole time.
I had to.
Yeah. To go in and have it just pan over to Jabba's palace and then have Big Bib, like, played by Matt Wood. Did you know that Matt Wood played Bib Fortuna in that scene?
Really?
Yeah, because he played him in The Phantom Menace. I love that. That was just like, I never knew I needed to see that in my life, but I am so happy I did.
He's turning into Jabba.
It just makes so much sense. I mean, if he survived, the next Rebo could have survived. So could Drippy McCool. Was
he on the sail barge?
Yeah, because remember when Leia goes up against Jabba and he like puts his hand on her back?
Yes.
So, and Bosk survived the sail barge too. Yeah. So I guess we've talked about this before, but in Legends, he had his own little skiff that when he saw everything breaking out on the sail barge, he got onto it and he went back to the palace. He was wandering on the palace and he found the Bomar monks, and the monks kind of took him in, and he ended up giving his brain up to the monks. He got put in one of those spider things, so I'm glad they didn't go with that route. But
that's just too much. That's from the Tales from Jabba's Palace book.
Yeah, which is an old Legends book. The Scum and Villainy was always something that really interested me growing up. So
sure. Well, I'm glad that they didn't put his brain in a Bomar monk, but I'm glad that we got closure on the character at least. Like, that's a big character. I'm sorry if you don't agree with that and you don't appreciate Star Wars to the same level that we do. God bless you. But Bib Fortuna, he's pretty recognizable from the original trilogy.
Yeah, it was better than just some random guy too. You know what I mean? Like, it would have still been recognizable, but to have him be on there,
Mhm.
and yeah, I just love that. Just he was just such a fat guy. It's like it made so much sense that he was the crime lord now,
And
but it wasn't as active.
he has such a run-down looking palace, but it was
Yeah,
cool to see, like, the more details with Jabba's palace that we didn't really get to see in a very clear way before, right? Because 1983 technology is just not digital at that point, and it's hard to get all the details of the palace and all the background elements. But in this, everything was just so much more clear. And I like the little Rancor heads on the throne itself. That was pretty cool.
yeah. Well, and I remember when we were watching it, Katie was like, "Don't step there, Boba. Don't step there. There's a trap door there." I was like, "Oh man, that's a good point. Well, there's a trap door there, but maybe they have a new Rancor. I don't know." It did look kind of weird at the end, though. That final shot with him and Fennec on the throne. It does look like it, for the first time. Looks like the volume for like.
I didn't feel that
There's just
way.
something weird about the way the lighting is. From what I've heard, that scene was shot really recently,
Oh,
like
really?
on the set of Boba Fett. Yeah.
Wow. See, I love that shot. I don't think that looks bad at all. I love that she grabs the spatchka in the back and starts drinking it on the throne. It
Yeah,
almost
that like
felt
she was
very
very comfortable.
cliche. Yes.
Yeah, and maybe she had been an enforcer for Java. Nice thing is we'll see her history at least a little bit in Bad Batch before we see her in Boba.
Well, didn't it say something about the huts? When Toro and
Overlooking.
Mando are sitting there in the cantina, didn't he say something about the huts? Or I guess that wasn't about her. It was more or less like the huts are in charge, but they're no more on Tatooine.
It did talk about how she worked for the
That's what I
highest
thought.
bidder, and yeah, like she was an assassin for the Huts. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
So maybe we'll see more Huts. I don't know.
Ex Imperial, and then after the fall of the Empire, went to work for the Huts. I mean, but the Huts weren't around, so maybe she stopped working for the Imperials earlier than Return of the
Yeah,
Jedi. I don't know.
I don't know if she's a former Imperial.
I've got that. I thought they said that.
I don't remember,
I could be wrong.
but yeah, I don't. I could be as well, and I'm not sure, but I don't know if she is or not. It'll be on the screen right here. Imperial, not Imperial.
I'm curious to see where they take it next, though, and to have him just take out Bib so easily. I loved the way he acted as well. Boba, oh, it's great to see you.
And I just thought it was funny because like Boba has like no right to the throne. He's just like, yeah, I'm taking this for myself because you have no way to enforce this, and nobody seems to really care about Bib anyways. So
Yeah. For so long, I feel like Boba had been an agent of the Hutts, right?
yeah,
Not that he has a right to the throne, but it felt like he did all their dirty work for so long, probably, that it's about time that he gets a reward out of it.
yeah. Since the Clone Wars, I mean, we saw him doing jobs for the Huts, like his crew at least on Nal Hutta when Maul goes there.
Yeah.
You know, what do you think this series, Book of Boba Fett, that's going to be a lead up to season 3 of Mando? What do you think this is going to be like?
I'm a little torn because when I first saw it, what I thought is just like we're getting chapters 1 through 16 with Mandalorian, this almost was like a middle chapter. It's almost like the Bible, like the middle chapter in the Mandalorian, the book of Boba Fett, right? Because we're taking it chapter by chapter, and it's like we're watching this book all play out. But I was kind of surprised to get the news that this is its own show. And
Yeah,
I'm not sure how I feel about the title now either. It's a little strange.
but it takes place in the timeline of Mando.
And I
So that's
get
what
that.
I don't know if it's been said or not, but I'm pretty sure it's going to come together with Ahsoka and Rangers, and like these shows that are in the Mando timeline are all going to come back together into the main show.
Yes.
But I would like to see it spend some time on its own and get its own legs to try to find out stuff like Rada the Hutlet is still out there, still unexplained, and in Aftermath, Cobb Vanth and them have a Hutlet in Freetown that Malakili, the Rancor keeper, is raising. So it would be interesting to see that, like Game of Thrones, bring Cobb Vanth back and in some way to challenge Boba's throne. I don't know, like something like that to
Hmm.
like Game of Thrones, where Rod is like, I have the throne, but and then you see for some reason how the Huts, like why they were in charge and why they were the gangsters,
Yeah.
just to make them a threat.
Well, I want this to also make sense for the time frame that it's in for Mandalorian. And to me, it felt like the underworld itself was not only controlled by the Hutts of this time, but when did Crimson Dawn officially break up under Maul? Like, are they still operating as a syndicate at this time?
I wouldn't think after Maul himself dies. I don't know who, because Dryden Voss and all them before Episode 4. I would think that they, but maybe I don't, because like the Pikes left during the Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Or I guess they had a loose alliance, but they were gone by the time of Solo. They had a
Yeah.
loose alliance with Crimson Dawn. Yeah, I don't know if because it's left. It's just pretty much Mandalore and Black Sun at that point, isn't it? Because the
Yeah.
Huts were.
But I
So I
feel
don't
like
know.
it reached farther than we saw in Solo. Like, how many other Dryden Vosses out there were there? And how many of them, like, never got word that Maul died? Are there any true believers still wearing Maul Mandalorian armor and trying to almost stick up for what that cause was?
Yeah. So do you think that his series is going to be like Boba reuniting the underworld to come together in the main show or
That's
something
where I'm
like that?
kind of going with it. Yeah.
Along those lines, who do you want to see in the Boba show? Like what? Like
That's
what?
the thing. I don't know who we can see. That's my problem with it. Or is it going to be a series that deals primarily in flashbacks so we can understand how he got out of the Sarlacc?
Oh, I think it's going to have its own flashbacks, but in their own way. Like we talked about Kenobi having its own flashbacks. In some way, Boba's going to have its own. Like I've heard people talk about how they want to see the young Boba storyline from Clone Wars with Cad Bane in live action told out in this.
Oh, now you got me excited.
Yeah, and if they
Oh,
could bring Daniel Logan back to play
oh,
Boba in that.
yes, give it to me. Yes, I would love that. I would love to see Cad Bane,
Oh,
honestly.
in live action, yeah.
I don't necessarily think we will. This could be the Bounty Hunter series. This could be, remember, Bosk, Dengar, IG-88, all these other bounty hunters that we saw on that bridge in episode 5 could come into play within this. And he could just start setting up like his own empire through the underworld.
I'd love to see like Zuckuss or Forlom or Dengar in action. Like I
Ooh,
guess we've seen Dengar in Battlefront 2, but like the like
that's a little
Zuckuss
different
and
though.
Forlom, like why they're formidable bounty hunters because they don't really seem like it. But I'd love to see that kind of in some way come into play and as a team.
I'm struggling to think where this is going to go and what it could deal with and what makes it exciting in that same way. That's what I'm
Are they
struggling
gonna?
with.
I've heard people talk about as well with Fennec freeing the slave girl. Are they gonna be freeing people, like creating like a freer Tatooine? Like I don't
Maybe.
know. It's not like Boba keeps the slave girl with him, so
The thing is, Tatooine is pretty free as is. It's not like anybody was ruling the huts before. Bib wasn't doing a great job, as we can tell. There was nothing really going on there.
yeah. Oh, I loved how empty the palace was, except for that one dancer girl that was from Return of the Jedi. Did you see her in the background? The
Yeah,
girl with the pink hair. Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure, but I've heard people talk about freeing slaves and freeing people that are left on
I think we could
in the
easily
Head
see
Empire.
Cobb Vanth back, like you were
Yeah.
mentioning, though.
Yeah, that's a good idea for a cameo, and I would be perfectly fine with seeing him again. And I think he will come back to the main show as well.
What I liked about this final chapter to season 2 was that it really did allow everything in this season that happened to matter. Like the stuff in the beginning mattered because he got Boba's armor from the first episode. The spiders, he needed that episode to introduce the Republic pilots, which come back and later give Cara Dune some more, I guess, clarity for what she's doing as a character and who
Mhm.
she is in this new galaxy after the Empire is gone. She becomes the Marshal on Navarro. And then we have, chapter 3, Bo-Katan. Literally, you could go through each individual chapter and say why it matters to this ending. I love that. It makes me so happy.
Yeah, and that's why I have faith in a show like this, a Boba Fett show. I think honestly, it feels like Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau want to tell this story, but they just don't have the shit. They can't call it in Mandalorian, so they're
Yeah.
writing and directing this show, putting it under a different title. So we're getting Mando, but not Mando for like 12 weeks or 16 weeks in December and January of next year. So we're getting 8 episodes of season 3 plus tagged on the Book of Boba Fett. So that's going to be like Mando content the whole way through December and January, if not more, of next year.
Well, and that was my question. What are the schedules for this? And do we know how many episodes it's going to be yet? I'm thinking no.
Jon Favreau was on Good Morning America on Monday, and he didn't mention season length of Book of Boba Fett. I mean, I wouldn't see why they wouldn't make Mando another 8 episodes like they did this year.
Yeah.
It's been a pretty good format for them. So
Oh yeah. I just want to make sure that whatever this tagged on series is feels like it has enough content to be its own thing and not have to depend solely on the Mandalorian series, if that's the way they're going with it. And that was my
yeah,
fear with them announcing that it's its own thing in a way, with Robert
Yeah,
Rodriguez, who directed Chapter 14.
Yeah, I trust them wholly. I think they're going to make the right choices. It's just we're just have to wait to get a synopsis more or less in a few months. So.
Yeah, and too bad we have to wait till December next year, not necessarily November, which is how it was this year. Not that we're in a drought for content, but
yeah, the next couple of weeks we'll be talking about gallery, which won't be as much in-depth stuff, but we'll still have other content we're going to add in, some Lego stuff, some other stuff that we've done, kind of been holding on the back burner while Mando's been in the forefront. So before WandaVision starts, so we have about 8 weeks of other stuff coming down the line. So
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, that pretty much wraps up this week, unless you have anything more that you want to add.
No, I'm doing pretty good. We have a lot of bright stuff on the horizon, and we really appreciate the community engagement. You can find me at SG Sketches and stuff on Instagram there. I've been actually posting quite a bit of stuff lately because Christmas is over, and I've been able to post some stuff, not of people's Christmas presents. So after Christmas, I'll post their Christmas presents. Today, I did a quick little mashup of Lil Gideon and Moff Gideon. Little Gideon from Gravity Falls and Moff Gideon from Mando. That was a fun time. I love to connect with people from the community whenever you can.
Of course. Awesome. And guys, like we mentioned before, if you have any questions at all for us about our personal lives or about our views on Star Wars, please drop a comment below and let us know what your questions are, and we will feature you on the show. You can find me at Matt Mellish on Instagram, on TikTok, and of course, where you're watching this, YouTube.
It's been a great week podcasting, bud.
It has. Thank you all for watching. If you've made it this far into the episode, I hope you enjoyed, and may the Force be with you always.
See y'all.